So basically we started in 2013 to develop web-based editing for XML. And 2 years ago at XML Prague, I presented editing on mobile devices. I don't know how many of you were there. There was put as a magic moment and the image moved from my laptop to an iPad and then to my phone and back. But from that moment, it took us about 2 years basically to take that technology and make it ready to be an end user product. And it was made available already as part of our SDK since I think about 1 year ago. But being part of the SDK requires people to, be developers, take the SDK, build an application that extends that functionality or uses that functionality. So the distance between the end user and that application was really large, right? You are not able to go on our website and have something working immediately. You had to access the SDK and build your own application, deploy that, and so on. So what we've done basically was to create an end user product that you can install and use. And initially we provided a web-based editing with a focus on mobile. And now we extended that to be a responsive user interface. So working nicely also on desktop as well as on mobile. So we kept, of course, the use on mobile devices. And let me announce that also on Twitter. So in terms of requirements, this is a server-side component. And when you connect with the browser, you will receive HTML5 and JavaScript that represent a document that you interact with. And being a server-side component, we reused the oXygen core editing functionality on the server side. And that's why we require a Java Enterprise Edition server on the server side. Like Tomcat, for instance, that's what we use during our development, but you can use also other Java Enterprise Edition servers. And then we have a number of connectors available that allow this to access resources from different repositories. We have a connector for GitHub. So if you have a project on GitHub, for instance, you can provide a link to someone, and that person, when they click on that link, they will edit a file from that GitHub repository. If they have commit rights, for instance, on that repository, they will be able to commit. Otherwise, they will be able to fork that repository and commit on their own fork of that repository. We have connectors also for WebDev. This allows you to connect to any WebDev server like Box.com, Alfresco CMS, or any other WebDev server. We developed also a SharePoint connector, and we have Dropbox and Google Drive connectors, but these are not packaged as plugins right now for the Web Author. So this can be used as part of the SDK, but they are not pluggable within the Web Author as an end user product. We plan to have them also as plugins, so you can just configure them rather than having a need to use the SDK in order to have such an integration. So we have on our website, we have this URL oxygenxml.com/webauthor. That will get you to this, let's say, micro website. I think that's the term that is called like a one page that describes, with anchors that describes this product. And here you can find either a link to quickly try an online deployment that we have, or you can download and install it and try it yourself. We provide Linux distributions, Windows, Web Archive, and an all platforms distribution that can be used, for instance, on the Mac. But as I said, for a quick test, you can follow this Try It Online link, and this should get you to the dashboard where we have already the GitHub, SharePoint, WebDev, Google Drive, and Dropbox connectors set up, right? So, for instance, if you want to open a file from any of your GitHub repositories, you can use GitHub. It will ask you to authenticate first. Once you've done that, then it automatically goes and shows your GitHub repositories. And once you select a repository, you can select a specific branch, for instance, on that repository. And then you can select a specific file, for instance, and then you can open that file. This is a documentation for the Data Open Toolkit project, which is available on GitHub, and I have a fork of that documentation on my GitHub account. Then you can follow, for instance, a topic link, and you can open a specific topic, make changes, and commit, for instance. But as a quick test, for instance, I can also try to maybe send you a link to this. I didn't try that, so but hopefully everything will work fine. So I guess that if you open that link from Twitter, if you if you follow me on Twitter, you should be able to see that link. And if you try to open that on a laptop, for instance, or even on a tablet or a phone, you should get to that topic after you authenticate on GitHub. But as I said, this is a sample, a test deployment that we have. Basically, being an end user product, you can just download this from our website. And once you download this, you can extract, for instance, in my case, I took the all platforms distribution. And once I install this, for instance, in applications, oXygen XML Web Author, I get something like this in this folder. So we have the end user license agreement, and then a couple of start scripts, and this comes bundled with Tomcat. this whole platform distribution, right? So in order to start this, I can run the start oXygen XML Web Author script. And this will ask first for, I don't know if you see this very well, let me. It will ask first for an administrative username and password. And now it says oXygen Web App started, right? And it says open localhost 8080/config to set it up. Oh. Sorry, I hit paste instead of copy. So if I say open this, it gets me to this page where you can decide whether you have a license already that you need to set up, or if you want to just try it, then you can follow the trial part. And this will ask for an email address, for instance, a name, country, and then you just say start trial, and that's it. Then you go to the dashboard and you have this running on that server. So it automatically gets a trial license and starts. And here's the dashboard where we have the GitHub, the SharePoint connectors, and a WebDev connector installed. And first thing is that you need to do some setup. So if I try to open GitHub from here, it says, you need to go to the administration page and set up this web application as an application for GitHub. So I can follow the link to the admin page. And here we have the GitHub plugin with a configure button. And this, says you need to go to GitHub and create a new application and specify the URLs to where you install this web application, basically, to GitHub. And that will give you back, GitHub will give you back a client ID and the client secret that you can use. So GitHub knows about your deployment. So if we follow this link, then you can specify here the application name, the homepage URL, the callback URL as it's described here. So it should be HTTP, your domain name, port where the web app is installed, and then plugins dispatcher. So you just basically follow these steps and set this link. I have already defined, for instance, an application here which basically uses the local host as the callback in my case, right? So it says localhost 8080 for the callback URL, right? So I can test. I do not have this available with the specific name on the internet, right? And then you have here the client ID that you need to paste here, and the client secret. And now, if we go back to the dashboard and you use the GitHub, it says, log in with GitHub. So it gets me to GitHub to log in. You enter your user and password, but I have my user and password automatically remembered for GitHub, so it just gets me access to my GitHub repositories. And now any other user that will use the GitHub connector, it's already set up, right? So this is only one step that needs to be done by the administrator, let's say. to set up this as an application for GitHub, and the users will be able to just connect to the dashboard. Let me try to open a different file. This is a TI document, actually a journal for it's one of the articles for the journal for TI, where I played a little with the user interface with the CSS for the web author. So basically, we have the notes presented on the side. We have, for links, we have inline actions that allow to edit the target and the type attribute, for instance, directly in place. These buttons are also very nice if you use a touch interface on an iPad, for instance, because you can just tap on this icon to edit the attributes. And then you have this kind of actions where you can add, a new section maybe, or a list, a new item, and so on. So this type of user interface makes it quite easy for people that are not very familiar with the XML structures, let's say, to create the actual XML structure. And now we can say, commit, and then we can provide a commit message. It will commit automatically with the same branch, but we can select, a different branch or type a different branch name, and click OK, and it will commit. And if we go on GitHub, we should be able to see this new revision created there. In case of conflicts, we try automatic merge. If that is possible, then we provide that as an option. Or we allow the user to force commit their changes as a new revision. So like on overwrite and commit. Or to commit on a different branch. So these are the conflict resolution. Similar to this, we have the connector for SharePoint. For this, you need to set up again a similar application with Office 365, and that will call back to the oXygen Web Author application that you deployed. And we also have this WebDev connector that will work with any WebDev server, but the web app also contains a local WebDev server. The sample files are stored on that local WebDev server. So with this, you have access to some files on the same server as the oXygen Web Author. I think this allow you, for instance, if you check out from a repository on the folder that is visible through the WebDev interface, then you can provide a link to users to review that content or to create new content. And then once that task is done, then you can commit that to your Git or Subversion or whatever repository and continue, right? So it allows this kind of using this as part of a workflow. Also, we support private GitHub repositories. So if you have your information more sensitive, right, you can use a private GitHub repository, and other people will not be able to see that. Only the people that are authenticated on GitHub with access to that private repository. So if we go to the administration page, Here you can specify a different server for the license or set up a permanent license. Now I have a trial license that I just got to quickly get started. Then you have access to the plugins. We support MathML, for instance, rendering, and there is a company called Redis that provides a MathML editor in the web. So they have a support for the oXygen Web Author as well. So we support basically MathML both for editing with that third-party component and for rendering. By default, we support SVG. And then we have the WebDev connector and the local WebDev server, which is also a plugin for the Web Author. And then here you have the frameworks that are deployed. Okay. And you can see here we have the Data framework, Data map, Data val dogbook. So basically Data dogbook and TI support, XHTML support, and the MathML framework. But so what is, are you familiar with oXygen frameworks? So basically, just a quick summary of that is, it's a package that bundles configuration information for oXygen and resources like schemas, CSS files, XSLT style sheets, and so on, right? And this bundle provides support for ready-to-use support for an XML language. Right, so instead of having each user setting up what schemas to use for dogbook and so on, you can create that configuration once, and then when that is deployed to an oXygen installation, that configuration will be enforced, will be available for all users. And the same frameworks that we have in the oXygen desktop version that works also in the Eclipse plugin will work also with the oXygen Web Author, right? So you do not need to define a completely new other configuration for this. And thus for so just to complete this, so we started this, we opened the page and the dashboard, and now to stop this, we have this stop oXygen XML Web Author script, and if you run this, it will stop the server, right? So that's, I mean, we try to make it quite easy, quite simple from this point of view. So I included here some slides with things that I already showed you. Dashboard. We provide some sample files in that WebDev server, local WebDev server, that can be accessed from the dashboard. And you can also create new files. Let me start it. So if we go to the dashboard, you can see here we have open and here you have new. So you can create also a new file either on the WebDev or GitHub or on the SharePoint repository. So the same connector plugins will be used to store a new file. And when you try to create a new file, we use the same new document templates that are defined in the frameworks. So if you define a template for a data task or something like that, that will be visible also, and you can use it to create that specific type of file, for instance. And now it will ask me, where to store that file. And then it opens the web editor with the Web Author with that file. Any questions so far? No? So here is it's an overview of the support that the GitHub connector provides. So it allows to authenticate on GitHub, browse repositories, edit XML files, commit changes, and resolve conflicts in case two people edit the same base revision and they try to commit on the same branch. The SharePoint connector allows to authenticate with Office 365, checkout, check-in, and cancel checkout for a resource. The WebDev connector has something that may be interesting. It has support for automatic locking. So if someone opens a file, for instance, it will be locked and other people will not be able to edit the same file, to make changes to the same file. And here is the licensing options for the Web Author. We are thinking to provide a number of subscription packages based on floating licenses, right? Because when you deploy this on a server, you may not necessarily have users that will work for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years with this, right? You may get contributors, you may get people to review your content, so you may have engineers that may create topics or dogbook files for 3 months, but after that they will move to something else, right? So we decided to use floating licenses and package this as subscriptions. So, and basically the price for this, if you think that, like a floating license is usually shared between about 10 users, is from 82 cents to $5 per month per user. So in this range the prices will get in this range. So we have this start package with 5 concurrent sessions at $200 US per month, for instance, with a corporate package with 100 concurrent sessions, which will be like handling 1,000 users, will be at $3,000 per month. This is how we were thinking we decided to license this commercially. I don't know, I'll be interested also in your feedback. Also, if you see a use for named users for this, but as I said, in our case, we were thinking that people will not use this, like for 5 years or things like that for a large period of time. So we were thinking that floating licenses, concurrent licenses, make more sense rather than named user licenses. Yes.
Even if you have a floating license, when somebody accesses the page through this web author, there is some kind of authorization or identification. Do you know which user is accessing the content?
No. The authorization part is done only when you try to access a file from a repository. So if you access something from GitHub, you'll be required, you'll need to log in on GitHub. If you access something from SharePoint, you need to provide credentials to SharePoint.
Authorization is done by that system, and that system then pulls up the web.
Yeah. So if you know the link, or you can put on top of that, when you configure the web server, you can set up some authorization, like requiring a user password or whatever. But otherwise, this will just count the user, from a specific browser, let's say. So if you access with one browser, it will be one user.
But I can pick up that information about who the user is from inside my web author plugin. Can I get to that information? Who is using it at that time?
Well, it depends.
Like if I want to, a user does some changes, etc., and then wants to write something to commit something to GitHub,
Yep.
but I want to have no, let's do something else. I want to have a little piece of code in my web authoring environment. Depending on who is editing, I'm going to do different things.
Yeah, then you can use the SDK and you can control, because if you use the SDK, this will be your own application. It will not be the end user application anymore. So then you can add whatever code or whatever logic you want, including this, right? But otherwise, if you use GitHub, for instance, then when you log in with GitHub, we know the end user name. And that will be used when you commit or when you make changes. So this part of the functionality of the web author is support for track changes that we have, and comments. So comments and track changes for the review functionality. And for that, we will use the username. For instance, if you are on GitHub, we will use that username. And I think it makes sense because you can't commit with our application username on GitHub or with the GitHub username on SharePoint and so on. So depending on the final repository, you will have the same username for that repository. But as part of the SDK, you can implement also a user access management or any policy in front of this. What we think this solves as main use cases is that, especially with the user interface customized as in the TI journal example, with inline actions, access to attributes directly. Let me see if I have that. Like this, right? So you can access attributes also on the side attributes panel, but it's if you put them directly in the user interface, it may be easier for users to use them. So I was saying that the main use cases I think are that within a company, if you want to get content from engineers, for instance, then you can have this customized user interface to allow them to give you content directly in TI, DITA, or your own XML language, or for review, right? So once you created documentation, for instance, and you want your engineers or other people from the company to review that, you can just provide them a link. Either if that's using the local WebDev server or some other repository or GitHub, for instance, they will just click on the link in the email, make comments or suggest changes, and then they save or commit that file, and you have them those automatically in the same document that you provided for review. The last thing that I want to show you is that in order to make it easy for development, we created also a plugin for oXygen desktop that will start a local instance of the oXygen Web Author. And so once you have a file open in oXygen, you have a button that allows you to open the same file in the oXygen Web Author with the current frameworks that are configured for that oXygen instance. So if you change the CSS, for instance, that will be reflected automatically in the web part, so you can see how that works. For instance, we have a topic here. I installed that plugin, and it contributes the Start Web App Editor button. And here you have either a QR code, so you can scan that to get the URL on your mobile device, or you can say open, and it will open the same file in the Web Author. Here you can see also the review panel has a lot of comments and changes in this file. So you have this accept, reject actions, and so on. if we make, a new change, then that is recorded automatically as track change because track changes are enabled here. If we save the file, we come back to oXygen and we see, that content because we edit actually this file from that's opened in oXygen right now. And if we go and say inspect styles, for instance, we get to the CSS inspector here. And then we have links here that will get us to the CSS. And for instance, here we can just say color red. If we go back to the topic, the color is red. If we go back to the browser and refresh, the color of the title is red now, right? So in this way, you can play with changing the CSS and see how that works in the web author, for instance. And once you decide, this is the final form of my framework, you just package that and deploy that to from the admin user interface. No, this one. Oh, I closed the web app, but with the admin user interface, you can upload a framework on the web author. Okay.
Are all the frameworks actions defined in oXygen frameworks also supported in the web view? So like toolbars and buttons and such?
So the custom actions that are defined in an oXygen framework will automatically work in the web author, except, of course, for actions that display user interface dialogues in Java. For those actions, also you need to provide a Swing interface for the desktop version. You need to provide an SWT interface for the Eclipse plugin of oXygen. And you will need to provide a JavaScript interface for the graphical part for the web author, right? But otherwise, and there is also very easy to work around this. For instance, if you want to insert a table, we show a dialog that says, how many rows, how many columns, and so on. But you can also provide an action that inserts a table with 3 rows, 3 columns, 2 rows, and then provide actions to add another row, add another column, so without the need to necessarily have the user provide, use a dialog or anything like that. And those will automatically work throughout all the desktop, Eclipse plugin, and web author. We have some, I will finish in a minute. So we want to have the Google Drive and Dropbox connectors available as plugins. We want to have an outline side view, a data maps manager side view, like a table of contents more or less to give you some context. Right now you can open the data map, will appear in an editor, and then you can follow links to edit other topics, but it will be nice to have also a side view with the data map so you get an idea of the other content around that topic. And we also plan to work more on supporting, like having 2 users working in the same, 2 or more users working on the same document, like Google Drive, Google Docs, right? But for XML documents. And maybe to offer also like a hosted option. So then you have, only maybe you pay only 1 subscription or something like that, and you don't need to install anything. So like a software as a service option, let's say. Right now we have this with the test deployment that we have, so you can use that even right now to test it. But that's not. I mean, we can take that down anytime. Let's say it's not. You don't have any warranty that it will be there, but something similar to that. So I hope you will find this useful for some of your future projects. And I think we need to stop right now for a coffee break. And I look forward to see the other sessions. I haven't seen them, so I'm looking forward also to see what my colleagues want to present and what our guests, Patrick, Tony, and Claudius will show us. And I have also another hopefully a very interesting session in the afternoon about dynamic conversions, how you can use I don't know, different other formats in oXygen as they are XML, let's say. Okay, so thank you, and enjoy the coffee.